This is Andrea. Following two incredible previous seasons, I am back with season 3 of the Neurodiverse Voices podcast. If you're listening or watching for the first time, I am the mother to a beautiful autistic daughter with whom I learn a whole lot every day. This has been my motivation to found and host the Neurodiverse Voices podcast. So join me and my guests on this mission to raise awareness and increase understanding. Together, let's make this world one that embraces and accepts difference. Welcome to the Neurodiverse Voices podcast. Hi, everyone. I'm very excited to today's interview. I've got a fellow podcaster. He's based in the UK. He is late diagnosed autistic. And I would like you all to welcome Jack from the Auticast podcast. Hi, Jack.
Hello. Thank you for having me. It's very lovely to be here with you today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for this. So we connected on Instagram, and here we are meeting for the first time through a screen, but kind of in person. So
I'm very. It still counts.
Exactly, it still counts. Yeah. And I'm very much looking forward to to continuing the relationship and to potentially working together.
Very good.
Jack, me and the audience will be very interested if we start by you telling us what has brought you to this stage of your neurodivergent journey. So, being late diagnosed, how has that been for you so far?
It's a question, obviously, that I get asked quite a lot now because I'm sort of that's become part of what I do with my own podcast, being kind of, I guess I'd call myself an advocate now. I'm not really sure if that's that.
Yeah, I think you are.
But there we go. So it's become something that for me is a passion and a focus, and something that I'm kind of I'm sort of absorbed into by choice, of course. But it's very much kind of, I feel for me now, it's so much about trying to accept that the peace has been made with myself on this journey now. And I'm kind of trying to use that inner sense of peace and self-acceptance to almost kind of channel out to other people who haven't maybe got there yet, or are still struggling with knowing how to do that. Because I think that's what I was looking for. I think when I was first made aware of it, and then obviously had to wait a long time for assessment and diagnosis. And there was just this kind of void, I think, of this is what's in front of me, but I don't really know how to sit with it, how to process it, how to feel about it. And so having gone through that myself, hopefully, I guess my focus or my role is to help other people do that stage and others, and just hopefully make people feel a little bit less perplexed by what's kind of been put there in front of their eyes, almost.
Yes, that makes sense. It does, absolutely. It's very important. I always feel inspired by so many people, and it's very important that we know that there's others out there who are sharing a similar journey, even though if it's in their unique ways, because its journey is going to be unique. So it's really, really admirable what you are doing by after having the diagnosis and being an advocate and helping the neurodivergent community. So you kind of touched base on this, but how did receiving the diagnosis impact your understanding of self-identity?
Hugely. And I, again, when you tell new people about what that was like or what that felt like, I really cannot express enough how many years of my life I struggled with not knowing myself, not knowing my identity, or not knowing why I perceived the world the way I did, why I interacted with the world in the way I did, why I had so many struggles, why I felt so restricted and limited in a lot of areas of my own life, and I didn't have an explanation for it. Didn't have any logic. I'm a very, very logical person most of the time, so I craved logic, and there wasn't any. And it having that diagnosis at last was something I always say to people is it doesn't change anything practically. It doesn't change anything kind of in terms of circumstance necessarily. It changes your level of awareness of self. It changes your, again, not overnight, but it starts to change your perception of self and the way you view yourself, perhaps more compassionately, more empathetically, more with much more context and with much more clarity, which I think a lot of people crave. A lot of people crave, but perhaps never achieve, even in their entire lifetime. So for me, that was such a crucial thing. That was such a crucial point, and it did take years for it to fully process, for me to fully go, okay, yeah, that is me. That makes a lot of sense. And there's been so many different phases, so many different stages to that process. Acceptance being one of them, for example. But I say to people now, to anyone else, it might seem insignificant. It might seem futile. Why get a diagnosis on a piece of paper, or what difference does it make? It transforms my life, because it transformed my life into one where this human being gets to understand why they're the human being that they turned out to be. And I don't think you can take that for granted, because without that information, what am I doing? Who am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to behave? How am I supposed to interact with the world if I don't know why in the first place? So it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, it's very important that you know yourself. I don't think we ever know ourselves fully, but
No.
I relate. I relate to that absolutely. Can we delve a bit more into how different you felt? So if we go back in time before your diagnosis, can you give us a few examples of how you felt different?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, I will say, perhaps more now, whereas I was more skeptical because I didn't want to make people uncomfortable, or I didn't want people to misunderstand or say something stupid. For me, being autistic has and continues to be particularly disabling for me. I've always had struggles with things that I guess your average neurotypical person would take for granted, wouldn't think twice about, or would be able to do with relative ease. That for me is either triple the effort, triple the work, or it's out of reach completely. So, it's for me, I think missing out on things like opportunities with employment, or missing out on opportunities with social interactions, or with relationships, with being able to maintain or construct independence of my own accord. Those are big challenges, and not a lot of people can understand when you kind of try to explain to them why you're struggling so much, because I think a lot of people think that you're making a bigger deal out of something that to them it isn't that much. And not being able to get people to understand the context of what you're saying, or what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, compounds that sense of isolation, because you think if no one else gets it, then where do I
and it's
sit?
part of the stigma that there still is around society. So what were some, we kind of answered this a little bit already, but the biggest misconceptions that you found before your autism diagnosis? Any other examples besides stigma and not being understood fully?
I mean, I got a lot of the really, really common ones. I mean, one of the biggest ones I got was you're too sensitive, um, you're um, you're too emotional, you're too anxious. Like you let anxiety beat you. You just need to learn to control it. You need to learn to fight it and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, believe me, I tried. But not understanding where that stuff comes from, not understanding the context behind that stuff, why it's so much more prevalent, why it's so much stronger in kind of intensity, that kind of stuff. That wasn't there. It was just, why are you always struggling with stuff? Why are you, why can't you just fit in? Why can't you just do what everyone else is doing? Why does everything have to be harder with you? And I've
very
grown up with that.
often.
I've grown up with that, so yes, I might be in my I like to say early 30s. I'm clinging on to my early 30s. Being in my 30s now, I haven't forgotten that stuff. It stays in your head. But obviously I'm in a different phase of my life now where I get to decide, what I can tolerate and what I can't, and the reasons behind it. Nobody else does. So
It's the shift that's needed, and the diagnosis empowers you to do that, isn't it?
yeah, of course. Yeah. And that's it. It's not that it changes anything practically. It's just that it's a kind of transition into a stronger sense of self and a stronger sense of acceptance, but also a stronger sense of ownership, I think, which is
And
important.
freedom as well, I would say.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very often that so on the top of the stigma and shame on mental health conditions like anxiety, it's very often the case that autistic young people are misdiagnosed with anxiety and depression when actually they are neurodivergent. And that's
I was one of
something that
those.
really needs to change.
I was one of those people. I say I've said it a lot on my own podcast. I've said it before to other people as well, but I was that guy that kept going in and out of mental health services, kept going in and out of doctor's surgeries, going, I'm not coping. I'm not finding life as manageable or as accessible or as fully open as my peers, as people my age, as friends, as people I've in my family, for example. I'm not finding myself able to have the same capacity or the same level of kind of accessibility to those things, and it fell on deaf ears.
Yeah.
I think the assumption is this dude's just
Lazy.
I think lazy, making excuses, which I hate. I hate when people say that. Or it's just kind of, I think maybe some people thought maybe he just wants to be anxious. So maybe he's just got used to it and he's just,
I think it takes so much courage to actually ask for help. If you kind of think about it, it's a bit common sense. No one wants to be anxious. No one wants to be struggling. So if you actually make a move and go and ask for help, you should be heard. You should
It
be
should, and
listened to.
I think it's a relevant point to mention as well, given the statistics around male mental health in the UK as well. We have a mental health crisis in terms of kind of suicide and self harm in this country for men. I think under 40, it's the number one reason men will die in this country, and so you really do hope that will be taken seriously. You really do hope that there will be the understanding there that actually for somebody, of my particular gender to come forward in the first place is a lot of the time, maybe not as much for me, but for other people is a huge deal and needs to be taken with that level of kind of sincerity and that level of kind of understanding.
Definitely. And on the top of that, the suicide risk for autistic people is a
Of
lot
course, yeah. Yeah,
higher than.
again, so you combine the two things again, and you've got an even higher
Yeah,
prevalence.
I actually I watched in the news yesterday that I was working and listening at the same time, but an autistic young boy took his own life, and that's heartbreaking.
Of course it is.
We know these things happen, but the more we can prevent them, the better.
It's heartbreaking because it's relatable. You know,
Yeah.
it's a young life lost, which in itself is, you know,
Yeah.
ridiculously sad. But also, you know, as autistic adults, if we didn't have the support systems we had, or if we didn't have kind of the information or the pathways that we did reach in the end, at least, you know, you're very aware. I think I'm very aware all of the time that those statistics are out there. We might not like to read them. We might not like to dwell on them too much, but they're out there for a reason, and I understand the reasons. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, not only for yourself, but for other people to be aware of them too, because, you know, that's what starts to educate. That's what starts to make people aware that, you know, being autistic it's not something you do on a whim. It's not a trend. It's not something that everyone gets a diagnosis of if they fancy it. You know, this is a different way of experiencing human life and reality and existence, and for a lot of people that could mean very big differences, you know, very disabling differences, very limiting differences. So yeah, just don't underestimate that, because there are so many of us now, I think, that are out here trying to put our truths and our realities into perhaps more public view, and it's big stuff. It's big stuff.
You brought up a really important topic as well, the trend, because I think the fact that those who don't understand have this thing of now everyone is autistic, now everyone is ADHD. I find that really difficult, actually, because being someone who's probably neurodivergent and realizing now at this stage of my life that I'm potentially neurodivergent, it doesn't help, because I have these two sentences always in the top of my head, and it just makes you doubt yourself. So I wanted to know your thoughts on that, on this, the trend. What do you think about it?
Well, first off, just as a quick point, I know somebody personally close to me who was recently diagnosed as autistic, and one of the first things they said when they came out of that assessment and was given that diagnosis was, "What if they've just given it to me because they give it to everyone now?" And I thought, that's crushing. That's crushing, isn't it? That's totally invalid. You've gone through all of that, and you've just, your automatic is to feel invalidated completely at the start, which is awful. Oh dear. Sadly, we appear to be growing again in the list of opponents that we have in this community. The list of opponents we have to our existence and our reality does seem to be growing again, which is disconcerting, which is problematic, which is anxiety inducing. I've said this recently. I did a post on my own podcast. I've said this recently. This thing about not only existing but also advocating for the autistic community. It's very much sometimes one step forward and 50 back, and I do feel like that. Certainly at the moment, it's not going to stop me. It's not going to change my trajectory on what I want to do or what we want to do as a community. But I hate this thing about autism being diagnosed to everybody. I hate it being, the thought being that it's so easy to do, it's so easy to get. It doesn't mean as much as it used to. You know, and that it's somehow something that people fancy having just to say they've got something different about them. I don't know where that came from. I don't know who started it. Well, I do. It was probably the media or the government or something like that. But and I think it just doesn't help. It just doesn't help. You know,
I
it's
was
the
going to
same.
say actually that the media has a huge role to play on this,
Of course,
because I've been
yeah,
seeing headlines in the Telegraph and the Daily Mail about, there's a cure for autism, for example. The latest one I've seen was about access to work, that millions of neurodivergent people are now claiming benefits on access to work. Well, access to work is not a benefit. Access
no.
to work is an incentive to actually bring people into the
I mean, it's the same
workplace.
as we have something in the UK called PIP, personal independence payment.
Yes.
They're attacking PIP at the moment as an out of work benefit. PIP has nothing to do with work. It has nothing to do with employment.
Yeah.
It's
And if
not.
people are prevented to have it, that will have a
Yeah.
huge impact
Obviously,
in
that's to
their
help
lives.
people who have disabilities or illnesses that makes their life typically harder or typically costs more, or they need more support with life. That's what that money's for. It's not tied to work. It's not tied to employment. It's not tied to earnings. It's not means tested.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with it. However, the media can spin that to
Yeah.
the general public as, oh, look at this. This is terrible. We're spending too much money on this. These people should be in work. A lot of them already are, but they're claiming PIP because they need additional support, and that it's those sort of stories when you dig deeper, and the same media outlets will tell you that everyone's autistic these days, but then they'll also tell you in a different article, there's hope for a cure for autism. No, there isn't. There doesn't need to be a cure for autism. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to cure. So
Exactly.
on one hand, you've got this story about everyone on planet Earth now is apparently autistic and has ADHD, and it's not a big thing anymore because everyone's got it. That's not true. And then you scroll down a little bit, a couple of months prior, and there's an article of first person in the UK cured of autism. Well, no, they're not, because there is nothing to pinpoint for a cure. And you just know then it's trash. So
Yeah.
it's sensationalist trash, I like to call it. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. That's the right wording to use. It's this lack of understanding that there's more research, there's advancement in information that we didn't used to have. Not long ago, the typical autistic person or child would be the one who was very good at maths and wouldn't make eye contact, and they would be male.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just, to me, it's just common sense. It's obvious. We need to look into the research and the information that we have available and further understanding.
I think
So
you've
it's
said
not
it,
that
though,
easy to.
You've said it. It takes common sense, but unfortunately, especially with the way that our media work across the world, common sense doesn't really take center stage with media these days. It's more about sensation. It's more about headline grabbing. It's more about clickbait. It's more about making people appalled at things. It's very reactionary, and unfortunately, those things sell more than telling the truth or applying common sense or being rational or kind of balanced about telling stories, which is a really sad state to be in, but it's unfortunately the reality still. One of the biggest enemies we have as an autistic community is the media. It's one of the biggest enemies we have, one of the biggest obstacles, and I think it always has been. But it feels like that playing field between us is getting worse again, with certain particular individuals kind of becoming more prevalent again.
Yes. Let's not even
Let's
go
not
to
even
that
go there.
topic. Otherwise, we'll stay here for 3 hours. There are some, like the BBC and ITV. They bring in, well, more focused on education. They bring in some good news pieces, because the education system needs a lot of change, and it's failing many children at this point. So it's good to see some of them at least supporting in that sense. But I think the print is where I see more of this these articles that just make me outraged about them.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to something more positive.
Let's do it.
Auticast.
Oh yes, yeah.
So I've listened to a few episodes, and I heard that this is not your first podcast, and I would like to know a bit more about your previous podcasts as well. What have you done, and what brought you to?
Oh wow. I thought I'd managed to kind of let that one silently die, but apparently
No,
not.
I think I went back to season 1 of the Auticast. One of the first episodes, and I remember you saying that you were back with Auticast. So I assumed that there was a previous podcast.
There was a previous podcast. Yeah, I did a previous podcast about autism in 2023. So Auticast started in 2024. I did another one in 2023, which was called Out of the Ordinary.
Okay,
Which again was another. Thank you very much. I didn't keep it though, so obviously I didn't agree. I did that in 2023, which was the year also that I was officially diagnosed.
Okay, that makes sense.
I spent half of that year waiting for diagnosis and then the other half of it being officially diagnosed. It was a very interesting experience because I think I don't know if other people have had these worries, but I spent half of that year doing that podcast thinking I'm making it through. I did 3 seasons of Out of the Ordinary throughout 2023, and I remember getting to the end of season 2 of that and thinking, gosh, what if they don't give me a diagnosis? Then I've just been a total fraud. I've just made an autism podcast and I'm not autistic. So, of course, that didn't happen. But it was a very different experience. I was in a much darker place when I did Out of the Ordinary. I was in probably a very kind of maybe more damaged place. I think I'd been through a really bad relationship breakup with somebody who wasn't very nice. I think I hadn't focused on wellness and well-being as much as I do now, typically. And so I think that's why I let that old podcast go, because for me, Auticast is the most sincere, genuine, and meaningful portrayal of not only me as a host, but also what the work that we're trying to do through Auticast means, I think, is the most authentic. So yeah, I'm not new to the game. You know, I've been doing it now for 2 years, 2 different podcasts, but Auticast has now eclipsed what I did with the last one. So I've done more of Auticast now than I did with the last one. So yeah,
but sometimes we need to go through that dark place. I relate not with a podcast, but I created an Instagram account, I think also in 2023 as well, because I like writing and I have quite a creative brain, and I wanted to inspire others, but I was in a dark place at the time. And then eventually I closed it, and I feel like everything happens for a reason. So like your Out of the Ordinary podcast, in my case as well, we have to go through these darker periods of life to actually get the motivation and get where we are at, because now you're passing like the Auticast has a lot more positive. It comes from it developed from a dark place. Sorry, I'm just rambling now.
No, I get you.
It kind of came from a dark place, but it had to happen for you to have launched the Auticast. And it's the same with me with that page. You know, I already had an autistic daughter by then. I knew that she was autistic by then, but I hadn't found my purpose. So it's very important that we find our purpose to align ourselves with what we want to do. So that's admirable.
I really like that. You've put that in a way that I've never really thought about succinctly in that fashion. But I think Out of the Ordinary came from a place of pain and darkness, whereas Auticast comes from a place of positivity, light, recovery, and kind of authentic well-being, I think.
And acceptance as well.
Acceptance. Oh, Auticast is hugely from acceptance, hugely, which is, again, a big difference. So Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's a funny old thing, isn't it? But yeah, there's a huge contrast between the two podcasts. Yeah, in terms of tone and theme and just general kind of. I feel like Auticast is a lot more bouncy and friendly. So
Yeah.
but you have to
It is.
learn.
I love it.
You
Yeah,
learn from what you did before.
exactly.
And I took that and thought, okay, well, Auticast is about to launch. It's about to get off the ground. What do I want to do with it this time around? And I learned from the stuff that I didn't like or didn't feel worked as much in the last one.
Yeah.
And I was quite fortunate in a way because I think there is a few people who knew me from the previous one who thought, oh, this guy's doing a new one. And they came across. So,
Yeah.
that was lovely.
It's really good. So, what kind of conversations and topics do you focus on the podcast? Because yeah, I listened, I'm a fan, and I want my audience to listen to Auticast as well.
Oh goodness! What do we talk about on Auticast? It's really anything. It's very structured. Auticast. That was again because I think as an autistic adult who loves structure, who loves routine, I was very keen to implement that as a template for an autism podcast because I think if you do an autism podcast and it's kind of all over the place, then it would trigger me. So I don't want to trigger anyone else.
Exactly.
So I kind of tend to pick a topic of the week, if you like. So the topic of the week, guest of the week. So that guest will come in, and then we will both work to kind of pick apart that topic that we both decided on, and we both want to cover, and we'll look at it from a really informal, really relaxed, very friendly, and very kind of inquisitive, non-judgmental perspective. I think because there's a lot of people who you can talk to people about particular areas of autism, and a lot of people will come at that with a very kind of, if that's been really difficult for them, of course that might be painful to talk about, or if it's been kind of really easy for people, it might be a bit more dismissive. But I think it's just more about being inquisitive. I describe Auticast's kind of style, a kind of interview style, as just two friends sat having a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and just talking openly, freely, and kind of without the worry of, oh, I must say the right thing, because that for me takes away the authenticity of talking, one autistic person talking to another. It's not authentic if we
I love that because that's exactly what I do with the Neurodiverse Voices podcast.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
And
You can
when
tell
my guests are a bit nervous, I was telling you at the beginning, I always get a bit nervous, but that's what I tell them. It's nothing more than two friends having a conversation and a coffee.
Sure.
So
it is, yeah. And I think I've just passed the 16th guest in total, who, again, I think when people say, why do you keep going, why do you keep doing it, what about it pulls you in, it sounds a little bit cheesy, but every new guest totally reinvents the podcast, because it's someone new. It's someone's story is completely new. It's completely fresh. There are similarities. There are things that we've heard before, we've heard in a different voice or a different way or a different style, but every new person creates a new story and a new journey and a new slice of autism.
yeah. And don't you feel like you learn a lot with them as well?
Hugely. Everybody. I'm fortunate enough to say it's never gone wrong. It's never kind of. I've never done an episode where I thought, that's a shame. But because everybody is just allowed as a default from the get go, I don't really tell anyone to do anything other than please just bring your authentic self.
Yeah,
that's all you need to do. And thankfully, through the kind of the work that we do and like I said, the informal kind of relaxed setting that we create, it's worked. So
well done.
it's just like, here's a different mate every week, and go for it, and that seems to work, and hopefully seems to appeal. So that's the style that I'm happy with, and if everyone else is happy with it, then that's the style that we'll continue with.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way to go. Any standout moments or guests on the podcast so far?
Oh, goodness me. Like I said, if there have been, 15, 16 of them so far, all 15 and 16 of them are just wonderful, amazing, incredible, inspiring, endearing, celebratory human beings. I really do mean that. They really all have a very, very special place in my heart up here. I have to say, the one person I'm probably admiring a lot, because he was there at the start. I had a guest, there's a guy called Anthony who's done a couple of episodes with me in
I
season one.
listened to that one.
Anthony has, as a human being, I'm sure he won't mind me saying, because we've become friends from the work we did on the podcast. But Anthony has grown into his self so much since the first time I met him. Anthony actually helped out with the previous podcast that I did, so that's when he came onto Auticast. For me, he was familiar, but for everybody else, he was new. I have watched him grow over 2 years, and I've watched him settle into his most authentic self, which he's still doing, and he's still working very, very hard on. To be a small part of his journey, to be a small part of his story, fills me with pride, fills me with a huge amount of respect and admiration. And Anthony is not unique in the fact that I've seen that in every single person I've spoken to, but he stands out because he was a very big part of getting Auticast off the ground by helping out with 2 episodes of the first season. And he is going on to wanting to kind of help other people in the autistic community himself now, but he had to reach that point. He had to get to that point where he was comfortable with himself to then help other people to be comfortable with themselves, which I'm starting to see a lot more, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I'm and we've had so many people. We've had so many people that have come on multiple times. We've had people that are doing particular projects. I mean, we had 2 guys who did a kind of an award-winning short film at the end of interviewed at the end of season 2. The work that they've done is incredible. The short film, it only lasted about 15 minutes, but it was 15 minutes of much more powerful material around what it's actually like to be an authentic autistic person than I've ever seen anyone do in the media, than I've ever seen anyone do in film or on television. And these guys did it in 15 minutes, obviously with a lot more work going into it. But to talk to them about that, story, about that experience, I became a fanboy because I forgot I was hosting. I was just so inspired by that.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And we've heard so many different people who are advocates, so many different people who were just newly diagnosed. Whatever you're looking for, I hope so far we've covered, because they're all beautifully, beautifully connected by being their authentic selves, but they're all at different stages. They're all from different backgrounds. They're all doing different things with their lives. And they've all, of course, naturally, despite the kind of misconception that all autistic people are the same and don't talk to you, don't have empathy, they are 15, 16 of the most wholesome, pure, rounded, genuine, non-judgmental, embracing, loving, and incredible human beings I think I've ever met in over 30 years of my life. And that's why, even if Auticast, for argument's sake, is not here in the future, one day, I'm never going to forget them. And they are just as much. I say this about my guests, and I think people don't necessarily believe me, but my guests are just as much a part of Auticast as I am. So,
yeah,
all of them are amazing, all of them. But there, of course, yeah, as standout moments, there are a lot, but those are just a couple. So,
yeah. No, that's incredible, and I relate so much. It's quite interesting that our ethos on both podcasts is quite similar, and that's great to see. So, Anthony, is he the actor?
He is, yes.
Yes. So I listened to that episode. I remember that.
I think most people know Anthony because he was the first one. So
Yeah.
a lot of people will enter the world of Auticast and their first experience is Anthony. So, well, and me, obviously. But yeah, I think he was kind of the gateway for a lot of people. And I don't think I deliberately chose Anthony as the gateway, but I knew he would help a lot of people settle in, I think, which was why I think he was so great as the first one. So, because he's got such a great way of talking openly and honestly and you know, kind of transparently and just being able to allow other people to relate to his experiences too. So yeah,
it's fantastic. So what are the key takeaways that listeners can have from Auticast?
I think for me, Auticast is certainly tried to be and will continue to try to be somewhere you can go that's safe, that you can go to feel less alone, less isolated. Especially as I mentioned earlier on, in those periods where you might be in kind of transition or you might be in a little bit of what feels like limbo. You might have just been made aware that autism is a possibility. You might have just been aware that, you know, you're displaying particular traits, but you don't understand them or they don't make sense, or you're confused about what this means in terms of where you go forward. You might be feeling like, you know, you're struggling socially, like making friends or having people who will actually listen to what you have to say, or actually not even necessarily listen, but will actually kind of replicate or verbalize what's in your head about how you feel and the differences you have. That's what Auticast is there, kind of my primary social media template. People can message me as the host of the podcast at any point if they want to. They've got and people are brilliantly starting to do this a lot more. I think it takes a lot of time because people are a bit nervous. They think I'm going to bite them, or they think I'm going to kind of, I don't know what they think I'm going to do to them, but I understand it because it's nervy. It's unfamiliar. It's, you know, I am a stranger essentially to people, so I understand it. But people are starting to do it more, which is fantastic. It's lovely. I absolutely, I'm honoured every time someone sends me a message saying this is what's going on for me. Have you got any advice? Have you got any kind of, can you recommend any support or anything? And a lot of the time I find that there's no actual intervention required. It's just having that relatable chat between two autistic people where someone's seen or understood or validated, and that's enough.
It ends up being a bit therapeutical for both yourself and the guest.
It's become a very informal place, not only to listen to a podcast about something that is your daily reality, but it's also become somewhere that hopefully has turned into also, if you want to be part of a supportive community where you can talk to someone if you really want to or you need to, I can offer that as well. So yeah, it's multi-layered.
Yeah, that's amazing. So people, you know what to do. Go and listen to the Auticast. And I'll share the links for the social media and for the digital platforms where it's available. Thank you, Jack. In terms, going back to challenges, which are quite a lot and a big part of being autistic, I would say. How do you navigate the challenges of being autistic in a largely neurotypical world? I remember just to add, I remember in one of your episodes, you mentioned the gym, that you were struggling to go and you had to choose specific times, and you had an app where you can see how many people are at the gym, and you would choose to go when it's less busy. So that could be one example.
Yeah, that's still very prevalent for me. We've just hit a period as well at the time of recording this where we've come out of kind of that January phenomenon of everyone suddenly wants to go to the gym because they've just had Christmas and New Year, and everyone's just decided, I want to join the gym, which I don't begrudge anyone for. However, it does make my routine and schedule much, much harder because typically I will go to the gym. So I do, I have an app on my phone for my gym that I go to. Very carefully selected which gym I wanted to join. Again, like a lot of autistic people will relate to, I studied hard, researched it very, very deeply, found the right one with the right environment, the right space, the right volume, I checked it out before I joined up, all that kind of thing. But the brilliant thing is it has a really detailed and thorough app, which also tells you as you log in how many people are in that building as we speak right at this moment of the day. If that number is over a certain threshold, I'm not going in the gym. But if it's under and it stays under, I can follow my routine. I can follow my schedule.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, and again, when people will be hit with misconceptions about being autistic, a lot of people will say to me, without knowing any of what I just said, will say, well, I thought you were autistic. I thought you struggled. How can you go to a gym? It's like, you don't know the thorough detail. You don't know the thorough planning that goes into me being able to be in there. I've got my noise cancelling earbuds that every time I leave the house, they're in my ears, especially in the gym, because if it's quieter, I mean, if there's less people, then you don't really have to worry as much, but they're not coming out of my ears because without them, I can't be there. So it's just those little tweaks. I mean, noise cancelling earbuds, gosh, I wish someone had told me about those a decade ago. I don't know if they were as such a much of a thing, but gosh, they are transformative. They're transformative. They allow me to be not prolonged, but they allow me to be in places perhaps I wouldn't have been dwelling in previously for a little bit longer, just to be allowed to get things done that need to be done. I think, when you ask about kind of what's managing challenges, I know it sounds a little bit simplistic, but acceptance, self-compassion. I'm so motivated by self-compassion. I'm so motivated by inspiring others to embrace self-compassion, because I think if we stood back and looked at ourselves as a society, the one thing that's missing from a lot of people is compassion.
Very true.
It's a very cold, fast, cruel, cutting existence in a lot of corners of society. I think, especially now, we don't see an awful lot of compassion for each other, typically day to day. And so I was always brought up that, compassion's not important. Compassion's not kind of, it's a waste of time. Like, it's fluffy. You don't need to bother with that. And actually, when it came along and I started to kind of be embraced in therapy with compassion at the core, changed my life. And for me now, I go day to day and I say, what can I do that's achievable? If it's not, does it matter? We know what we're up against, if you want to put it that way. We know what our challenges are. We know what our limitations as a key word are. And we don't need to lambast ourselves for those now, because they exist. They have a place. They are relevant. They do mean something. So we either work around them or we work aside from them. So,
yeah. Any practical examples of how you practice self-compassion? Because I could do with a lot of them as well.
I think, a lot of people will. There's an expression which again is picking up prevalence again, which I'll try not to go off on a rant about it, but I have a real issue with, which is people who I've noticed quite a lot will say, I'm autistic, but I don't use it as an excuse. Or people who say, I'm autistic, but I can still do this, as if there's a need for justification, as if there's a need for an excuse in the first place. Because I always say, you're not excusing yourself, you're excusing yourself for other people, for their benefit. You're saying, I'm autistic, but don't worry, I don't use it as an excuse.
It's like a defensive mode.
Do you need to excuse yourself? If you're autistic, if you're disabled, that's your reality. Whether people like it or not is up to them. It's not up to you. So that's a big area, because a lot of people will say to me, well, if you push yourself a bit more, you might do it. Like, no, if I push myself a bit more, I'll have a meltdown, and then I'll burn out, and then I'll be no use to anyone for half a week. So, I mean, my partner will probably attest to this, but I am very headstrong in advocating for myself now, very, very headstrong in sticking up for my own needs, my own wellness, my own principles, my own kind of tolerances, which I've had a lot of people say to me, I wish I could be like that. And I think you can. It's one of those things that it's difficult to say to people because you can. It doesn't happen overnight. If it's not something you've been used to, it's a process. You've got to kind of transition to being comfortable enough to advocate for yourself in the first place. But my goodness, when you do, it changes the playing field almost of life, and it filters out those people who before would have just made you feel so unbelievably crap about yourself. It filters them out because there's no time for them. There's no space for them. You don't allow or create space for those people because people are like, oh, I think you're using autism as an excuse. Okay, that's your opinion. Move on. Like, you're not living my reality. So I don't really need to acknowledge what you've just said. You know, I don't judge the way you live your life, so don't judge the way I live mine. Because I imagine neither of those things are by choice. Even if it's someone else saying it, I imagine they don't live the way they live by 100% choice. You know, a lot of the way we live our lives is dictated by other things, and in my case, it's being autistic. So, you know, I it's not that I get. Well, maybe I do get a little bit peeved when people say, "Oh, I'm not using my disability as an excuse." Well, no, disability is not an excuse. It's a very valid explanation and a very valid confirmative piece of information that, you know, doesn't need to be excused. So, I get
that's a great perspective. Yeah, that's a great perspective. So, do you see your autism as a disability?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. You do. Okay.
I think in a way to describe that, because I see it as a disability because of the you know, there are very, very many limiting factors to me being autistic, having an autistic brain, and being an autistic individual in society. I suppose there is an argument that part of that disablement is as a result of the way that society typically is still, you know, predominantly set up for a neurotypical person to exist in and to interact with and assimilate into. However, part of that journey of kind of self-understanding, self-awareness and self-compassion is realizing that, yeah, my brain works very, very differently. Very, very differently. If you put me next to 10 neurotypical people, I would stick out like a sore thumb, which I'm fine with. You know, I embrace. I'm very happy with. I champion it. But you're also aware that, you know, those 10 people will probably be able to go on to do things with ease that will take me at the very least days, maybe weeks of planning before I can even attempt them, and they may not work. So I suppose in that respect, yeah, it's disabling because they don't have to deal with that. So,
no, that's a good point. I actually tend to say that I don't see my daughter's autism as a disability. That's why I asked, because I was interested. You know, you see a lot of the different, not less anyway, applies, because you're not less than anyone else for being autistic.
I think that there is an area of which, again, it's not, again, like I just said about people with their useful comments, it's not up to me to tell people if they're disabled or not. It's not my business. But if someone asks me the question, I can't do everything I want to do in life. I haven't been able to have the life that I imagined I would when I was 5-6 years old. Yeah. My reality hasn't turned out what I imagined it would turn out to be. There are lots of things in life I can't do. I can't be in spaces. I can't be around particular environments. I can't do certain things. You know, it's affected every corner of my existence. It's affected my ability to have relationships with other human beings. It's affected my ability to carve out, manage, curate, and maintain my own sense of independence or kind of interest, hobby, career, that sort of stuff. It's affected all of that. So if I'm putting myself next to a neurotypical person, yes, it's disabled me.
Yeah, it's disabling your ability to do certain things. So
if someone asked me the question, I don't have the life I imagined I would do, but I've accepted it. So
yeah, and I think that's the most important thing is, you embracing it and you accepting it. And I also feel like when you hear the word disability, there's still a lot of connection. And even myself, I do this. You think physical disability, and it's probably
Yeah.
time for these to change as well. This conception that,
But that's a
there needs to
society
be a
thing, isn't it?
difference between a physical disability and
Yeah.
neurodivergence. And that's why when
Sorry, I was going to say people put the stickers up on their walls now, like in the hospitals or doctor surgeries, like not all disabilities are visible,
yeah,
and that's as far as they'll go. And I think that's nice, but you're not really explaining it. You're putting a sticker up that no one understands. You're not really. We're not going any further than kind of introductory, meaningless gestures. Almost, it's like someone will read that and go, "Oh, aren't they? Okay," but then we don't tell them anymore. We don't tell them about autism. We don't tell them about ADHD. We don't tell them about neurodiversity. We don't tell them about, because the education, the awareness isn't there. So people are just like, I'm not sure that's true. I think all disabilities are just physical. But also, I know, and again, not attributed to any individual in particular, but I think there is also an element of a lot of people I've spoken to, a lot of people I see in the community, out of the community, etc. They'll say disabled sounds like weakness. Disabled sounds like
the
I'm less of,
connotation of the
or
word, isn't it?
or
Yeah.
I need to be fixed, or I'm weak, or I'm missing something, or I'm depleted in something. I mean, I've had to be so incredibly strong through in my entire life. Nobody is going to tell me I'm weak. They can, and I don't care, but there's no fact in it. There's no logic or truth in it, because all it's taken to get to nearly the age of 34 is strength. So,
Yeah. And again, weaknesses are subjective. And I
of
also
course.
feel like if people were better at showing vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
that the world would be a better place as well, because we are not Superman. We will talk about superheroes later, but we are not superheroes. We are human, and as human, we are vulnerable because
Of course. Yeah.
we are not strong all the time. We have our moments.
You can't pick and choose which parts of your emotional range you apply a good label to or a bad label to. Emotions come as a collective, as a range. You have to experience all of them at some point. Some of them will get stronger, some of them will dissipate, some of them will recur, some of them won't. But vulnerability, you can't grow as a person. You can't grow into yourself as a person without vulnerability. You
Maybe
can't
not.
avoid vulnerability if you want to keep growing, if you want to keep learning, if you want to keep staying true to your most authentic self. You can't do that without vulnerability. It has to be there, and you have to make space for it. And I know that's difficult, but it's like one of those things where the more you do it, it doesn't make you weaker. The ability to acknowledge, accept, and make space for vulnerability just means you're more well-rounded. And
I
that can only
actually,
be
I
a
actually
positive.
think it ends up make you stronger.
Of course it
Eventually.
does. Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But society won't tell you that. Society will tell you that being vulnerable will make you weaker, so don't do it. And if anyone tries to make you, then tell them to go away. But I think vulnerability is one of the most beautiful qualities, I think, in another human being, to be honest. And I think that's what I respect so much about people who come onto my podcast. To be on the podcast itself, and I'm sure if a guest comes onto a podcast, they've got to be vulnerable. They've got to be, because
And
that's where your truest kind of conversation comes from.
yeah, and open to share their story with the rest of the world because it will be available publicly. So
Of course, yeah.
yeah, I think again, there's a lot of things that need to change, but hopefully, people like you, people like me, and the rest of the community will, we will do our small bits and start changing the world eventually. So, what are some of the biggest strengths that being autistic brings into your life?
I think having lived over 30 years as an autistic person, whilst not knowing for most of that I was autistic, I think I have a very strong sense of resilience, very strong sense of self and awareness of self, and the ability to, I think once you've gained the confidence or the acceptance of self enough to do so, the ability to interact with the world or other human beings and offer something different, offer something that's not the mainstream, offer something that's not copy and paste from someone else, to come in and not disrupt so much, although I probably have done that at times, not disrupt the kind of status quo, but certainly question it, certainly challenge it, and certainly say, I get why we all do this, but does it actually serve us? I get why we've all done this for such a long time, but is it actually, does it have a people's well-being at its core, at its forefront? I don't think it does. So, if everyone's willing, why not have a conversation about it? Why not look at a different perspective of it? Why not challenge it? Why not look at differences? Why not look at other options? But of course, I think anyone or anything that challenges something that is kind of ingrained in society or in culture is dismissed, because I think that's what I've learned about being autistic. A lot of people still in society don't know what autism even means, don't know what it is, don't know what it looks like. And in typical human being fashion, you can always rely on, human beings tend to reject things that they don't understand. They tend to fear things they don't understand. They tend to attack things they don't understand, because it's a natural human instinct, that goes back further than any of us. But I think I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid to be rejected. I'm not afraid to be misunderstood. I'm not afraid for people to take issue with. My motivation isn't, there's no undercurrent, there's no kind of malicious intent to it's I just want to change things for the better for people. I want people to feel better about themselves, about the world they live in, about the life they lead. And if I can see things that maybe other people can't, then if they want to listen, I'll say it, and we can have that conversation. You don't have to take it, you don't have to do it, but it's that openness of mind. And I think one of the biggest things about me as an autistic person is my inquisitive nature.
Yeah,
If I don't
being
understand something,
curious.
I want to learn about it. If I don't agree with something, I want to learn about it. If I think something could be different, I want to learn about it. I'm always wanting to learn. I'm always wanting to understand human behavior or societal behavior. All of that stuff is, yeah. I'm never going to get tired of learning, because it's what makes the world go round for me. So,
Yeah.
fiercely loyal. I'm fiercely loyal to people. A very strong sense of justice, which, as you can probably imagine,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't always go very well. Sometimes gets you
Nope.
into trouble. But again, it gets me into trouble sometimes. But would I change it? No, I wouldn't. So,
Yeah, it's
um,
part of who you are, and it's actually fascinating to see how far you've come, having gone through so much. So yeah, keep going. You are
thank you.
doing very well.
Thank you very much. I
So we
appreciate that.
touched base on some of your sensory sensitivities when we were talking about the gym. Um, how do you manage them? So in terms of noise, use your noise cancelling
Mm-hmm.
earplugs. Is there any other sensory needs that or sensitivities that you have, and how do you manage? How do you overcome those?
So noise is definitely the biggest one, and the earbuds thing is kind of apart from just either leaving an environment if it's too noisy, which I have done and will still do
Mm-hmm.
from time to time, because you can't. I suppose the one thing I'd say to autistic people is, how do I manage? The one thing I say to people is, you can't manage every environment, you can't manage every situation, and even if you think something's going to be something, it might suddenly change before you get there. or it might change whilst you're there, and that's not your fault. That's beyond your control. So just leave if that's
Yeah.
there's no shame in just leaving somewhere because it's uncomfortable. I think crowds are a big issue for me. I can't bear being somewhere that's too kind of busy in terms of the amount or proximity of people close to me. Crowds, no. Busy, condensed buildings or spaces, no. I can't bear people walking behind me. I don't know if that's like more of a trait, but I have a really strong sense of personal space, because I think I don't like being touched by strangers. I don't like being in the proximity too close to strangers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm all right if I know the people more so, but I do tend to like it to be more on my terms, I think. So I think even just like planning routes to go to places I already know, I know what the quieter ones are. I know what to expect a bit more. And, if someone's on my side of the street, sometimes I'll just cross. So we don't have to, so even like I do have the clothing thing as well. A lot of people say to me, I've got this thing about labels and clothing. Interestingly enough, the t-shirt I'm wearing today, I've had to like take out
the label
because it was itching my neck and I just couldn't concentrate on anything. So I have that one. I like to wear clothes that are quite comfortable to wear, so nothing that's too kind of grippy or whatever. The thing about going to the gym is it's great. I love it, and it's a good source of physical and mental well-being. But the irritating thing is it's starting to work physically. So my body's growing in a positive, healthy way.
Yeah.
But then all my t-shirts are too tight. I'm like,
you need to get new ones.
oh, damn it. Like I've just made a sensory problem from trying to do something good. So yeah, there's hey, first world problems,
but
I suppose.
it's okay. You can buy new ones.
Exactly.
It's fine. So great. Thank you for sharing. In terms of the community, how has the autistic community supported you in your journey so far?
So when I was waiting on the waiting list for my diagnosis, didn't know where to go. I tried joining in-person groups, which the part of the UK I'm in, there wasn't any. I tried accessing support for people who thought they were autistic or already are autistic in my local area. There wasn't any. I tried finding kind of online professional environments that could support with that sort of thing, or I could just talk to about questions I had or worries I had or trying to understand what I was feeling. There wasn't any. So I ended up on Instagram. I'd never been on Instagram before. Social media, ironically, for a podcaster, is not somewhere that I particularly. I have a really interesting relationship with social media. I love what it can do for communities such as us. I love that it can help keep people away from loneliness, away from isolation, away from kind of a place of nothing and no one. I don't like what it does on the negative side of things. I don't like what it does for causing more harm in society for issues like autistic people, etc. But I found Instagram and discovered that there was a community. Discovered fairly quickly that there were people who were similar to me, or had already been diagnosed, or kind of were advocating for autism and autism awareness and education, that kind of thing. And I just thought, wow, no one. The thing of it is, when you're going through official processes and you're waiting for diagnosis and you're going through waiting lists and you've talked to professionals, no one ever says to you, by the way, if you need support in the meantime, there's a massive community of autistic people on Instagram. If you want to join up, if that's your thing, and then you'll find some support there. No one ever tells you that. So I really worry about the people who never get told that and never go looking, because then I think, gosh, well, they must be so lonely.
I think for children here in Oxfordshire, they are trying to change that. At least they are creating this supportive steps initiative where there's but again, it's more for the parents, and it's to empower the parents to support the children and to avoid loneliness. So there is some change, but I think this is a local thing. And I think for adults, I don't see many support groups around here as well. I even responded to someone on the village where I live Facebook group. She was asking if anyone knew about any support groups for like young autistic young adults around, just to allow socialization, and there's not much. So it would actually be great to see more in person, even events. Online works, but I feel like, and maybe you are going to contradict me on this, not being autistic myself, but probably online is actually better in terms of the personal space, and it will make people feel more comfortable. So it's even, I'm just thinking out loud as I speak. It might even be better, but that doesn't seem to be much. So
I only had a conversation with someone about this yesterday.
Okay.
Somebody who said about Auticast, that Auticast is someone that talks, predominantly about autistic adults and how unique they found it. A podcast that talks about the adult experience of being autistic, because once you kind of leave the kind of 18 to 19 bracket of being alive, it's almost as if your autism's not really a thing anymore. It's like you don't exist anymore in that realm. And people I did the same thing. People come out of the 18-19-year-old bracket and they drop off a cliff because there's no support anymore, because there's no one to talk to anymore about it. There's no one to guide or to advise or whatever. And I think a lot of people just think, am I still autistic, or am I just supposed to get on with it now? Or
that's not fair.
And it's not fair. Of course, don't take anything away from autistic children's support, because they need it. I needed it, I didn't get it, and they need it. So please, absolutely, there's a 100% a place for that. It's just that we're missing the adults. People that, lo and behold, they might have got older, they might have got kind of, a bit more long in the tooth, as we would say, but this is still autistic. They still need support. Still need services. Still need, obviously dependent on the individual needs, of course, but it doesn't go away. So neither should the conversations, neither should the awareness, neither should the support if it's needed. So
it's very interesting, actually, because I had an idea, as I do have many ideas. So I work for the Oxford Health Biomedical Research Centre. It's a partnership between the Oxford Health NHS Foundation Trust and the University of Oxford. And so we have 11 themes of research. And I had the idea that I wanted to do a neurodiversity conference this year. It looks like it's going ahead. So hopefully by the time this episode is released, we will have more, full confirmation. So I've just started working on the planning and everything. And that was actually my aim, because the only theme of research that has projects on neurodivergence is the mental health in development, which is focused on children and young people. So when I started thinking about this conference, I was like, but what about the adults? What about the other themes of research, like better sleep, for example, or pain, which are things that neurodivergent people, have across the lifespan? Why are we not thinking about this? So hopefully with this conference, we will bring this into the conversation, and at least in terms of research and healthcare, we can, start thinking more widely and actually focus more on young adults. And then, even so, the other theme that we have is dementia. And I was even thinking the other day, it might not be too related, but it could be. What about researching the likelihood of neurodivergent people to actually end up having dementia? Is the risk higher than neurotypical people? At this point, probably very difficult, although with the number of diagnoses increasing, we could actually start somewhere. But I think it's something that's worth being investigated scientifically. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to help with with this idea of mine, and there will be some positive results out of this
Yeah, no,
conference.
for sure. Good luck with it. Fingers crossed. Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll send you an invite. Maybe it's your opportunity to actually come down to Oxford.
There you go. See, there you go.
Great. So the next question, I think we covered it already, but is there anything else you would like to add to changes you would like to see in society for this world to be more inclusive of autistic people?
Oh, there is. Whether it's going to be achievable is such a different question. To implement the changes that I think I'd like to see, and I think a lot of people like me would want, we really have to start as a society embracing difference.
Mhm.
We're not there yet. We're not there yet, I don't think.
And we
Uh,
probably need about 2 more generations or
I think we do, yeah. I thought we were getting somewhere, and now it feels like we've totally given up and gone backwards about 50 years. It's really difficult to answer without that, I have to be honest, because I think to be able to embrace people who experience the world in a completely different way or exist, with very differently wired brains, not in the wrong differently wired way, but just in a differently wired way. I think you have to be able to have open-minded discussions. You have to be able to be open, welcoming, non-judgmental, embracing, and curious, as a word I mentioned before, about difference. I don't think we're there yet.
yeah.
I don't think we're ready for those conversations. We are as a community, but neurotypical society is not.
Yeah. And we want to remain hopeful for the future, and we will still be
Yeah,
hopeful. However, if we look at history, there's so many things that are still left to. These are the things that should be fixed, not neurodivergence, like racism, discrimination based on being white, black, Asian. This still breaks my heart to see
yeah.
that is a constant.
The thing
Gender and
is, yeah,
transgender and homosexuality, we just need to embrace it. We are all different. And I normally say this, and this is my view: if no one is killing or stealing or doing anything that's harming you, just let them be, because the more you criticize them, the more stigma you put on them.
it's amazing how common sense that is, isn't it? It's as long as
Exactly.
they're not doing anything wrong, they're different. Leave them
Exactly. And it
be.
doesn't matter if you're white
Let them
or
get
if you're
on.
black, if you're homosexual, if you're a
However,
lesbian.
we mentioned it earlier. We're not ready for those conversations as a society as a whole. The one thing we need to get rid of to allow that process to speed up again, we need to get rid of the mainstream media. We need to get rid of the media as it exists and has done for hundreds of years. It's blocking the way. It's blocking the way. If that wasn't blocking the way, we would probably progress more naturally as human beings on our own accord in embracing difference, because we wouldn't have anyone to influence our opinions. We wouldn't have anyone to influence the way that we perceive or project onto others, or to alter the context or the narrative behind difference. It would just be up to us to decide. It would just be up to us to learn of our own accord. What does difference look like? What does it mean? Is it threatening? Oh no, it's not. Funny that. Whether that's race, whether that's sexuality, whether that's gender, whether that's neurodiversity, neurology, that kind of stuff. Whatever it is, it's not skewed by someone else before you get to it. Almost.
But I think the governments also have a role to play
A massive role. Yeah,
in
yeah. Well,
terms of
they're not getting off scot free
law.
either.
There's a lot of yeah, there's a lot of emphasis on equality, diversity, and inclusion these days. And more companies and organizations are, being specifically in research, it's something very, very important. But there should be more consequences if you discriminate, if you don't. There's an Equality Act that should, mean something. So there's many parts that are responsible for this.
It's good to say it. It's good to say you believe in equality. It's good to say that you believe in embracing people's difference. It's good to say it.
Yeah, but if you don't act upon it, it doesn't make a difference.
And people who are different, or people who do come from kind of different backgrounds, environments, or existences, they will know the difference between if you mean it or not. And they do, to their credit, they always do. People of color always know when you're saying something that's a token rather than a plan. People of different genders, people of different sexualities know when you're treating them as a way to make yourself look good versus do you actually care about their existence. It's the same with autistic people. We know when someone's actually wanting to take curiosity, take an inquisitive focus and go, do you know what? These people who are autistic, people who are neurodiverse, experience the world completely differently from anyone else. So actually, shall we treat that a bit more seriously? Shall we delve into that more, or shall we just say I support autistic people this year until I have to tell you it again next year? That's no use to me, I'm afraid. So
yeah, absolutely. So what advice would you give to someone who suspects they are autistic and haven't yet pursued a diagnosis?
That's a good question as well. I thought about that one. I thought, I don't know if I do advice. It's tricky. I probably sound like a total hypocrite because I will give people advice if they want it. I don't know if it's in my nature to actively do it. However, to answer the question, my advice would be something that I did when it was first mentioned to me, because I didn't go looking for autism. Autism found me in the end. And it obviously in time made total sense and is now my reality. I think read up on stuff, do your reading, do your research, come on to places like social media. Obviously, don't just talk to any random stranger about it, but try and find somebody who does advocate for the community. Try and find people who do have things like podcasts, or they write books, or they make content, or that sort of kind of thing. Try and find people who kind of are immersed in the world of wanting to help others understand in the first place, because then you can have those kind of more conversations where someone's not going to judge you just for having the conversations. Whereas perhaps sometimes one of the first things someone will ever do on their journey towards being diagnosed with autism is they'll go and talk to a doctor or a GP. And that for a lot of people can be a very intense experience, because of course a medical professional is going to be like, okay, you want me to do something quite big for you, you're going to need to give me huge reasons, you're going to need to give me proof, you're going to need to give me background, you're going to need to give me evidence, and that for a newbie a lot of the time is going to be like, I am not prepared to be in this room right now. And so I think talking about it with people who are already immersed in a community that is separate from the kind of professional medical healthcare world is more informal. It's more tolerable. It's more manageable, I think. And you can learn a lot more about particulars with neurodiversity. You can learn more about traits. You can learn more about kind of mindsets, behaviors, lots of different components of being autistic, for example, that you probably won't hear from a doctor. You probably won't hear from someone who's typically working in healthcare, because I don't think it's unfair to say that a lot of people in kind of mainstream healthcare don't actually have that much knowledge about autism. Well, I don't know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, I'm not trying to, but it's no discredit to them, but it still feels a little bit more niche in a lot of corners of society. So it's about finding those niche areas where you can just kind of turn up, take the mask off and go, I've got so many questions, can you answer them? And then you can kind of compile that almost that kind of portfolio of information, pick out what's relevant to you, chuck out what's not relevant to you, and then you've got much more of an arsenal to come to with you to kind of take to a doctor and go, yeah, do you know what? All of this I've researched, all of it applies to me. I know what it means. I know how it relates to my existence. So let's have a conversation.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think,
very important
yeah,
because
that's kind of
if you
standing on
go
a platform.
kind of unprepared, I totally agree with you, Jack. I think there should be like a standard training for all professionals in healthcare, and
Yeah.
it's not the case. I had that experience myself with my GP recently, as I'm starting my journey on the right to choose path. I don't think she has a clue. She even gave me incorrect information. She told me to refer myself when that's not how things work. So we are just losing time, and they are clearly not informed about even the processes. It's not just about neurodivergent itself, but the process of how things should work. So yeah,
And
more
it's
information is
yeah,
needed.
and it's contradictory as well, because by that token, if we have healthcare professionals who know virtually to nothing about autism, how could we all be getting diagnosed as autistic? Because if these people
Yes,
don't understand it in the first place, they're not
good
going to
point.
diagnose everyone with it. So, you know,
Yeah, that's a very
sorry,
good point.
sorry to point out the flaw in that mentality there, but it's hard enough. I can't even remember the last time I saw a doctor, to be fair. Not because I didn't need to, just because. But I've never had a conversation with a healthcare professional who I've sat there and thought they get what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
It's never
and
happened.
that proves it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's one thing you wish people understood about you without you having to explain it?
I'm different, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's exactly as it's supposed to be. It's not a threat. It's not a problem you need to solve. It's not a flaw you need to fix. It's not something that you need to be concerned about in a negative fashion. And I'm not just talking about me. I'm talking about people like me. I'm talking about other autistic people too. Is embracing difference means accepting difference. Embracing difference doesn't mean I'll embrace your existence and then try to come up with ways to make you more like me. That's not embracing difference. Embracing difference is going, do you know what? I've said this before a lot and people are probably bored of me saying it, but there's over 8 billion of us now walking around on the planet. Like, we're not all supposed to be the same. The literal point of life is we're each versions of ourselves that are never replicated anywhere else ever again. Me with this body, with this face, with this brain, no one is ever going to exactly have the same thing ever again. That's my difference. That's my uniqueness. So, you
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
that's what I'm bringing to the table until I'm no longer here, and you'll have different people. So, you can accept it or you can't. I certainly haven't got the energy anymore to fight with you. So,
Yeah.
accept it or don't. It's entirely up to you.
Yeah, that's heartwarming to see, really. And yeah, people should listen to you for sure.
They
Yeah,
don't.
they should. Okay, so now let's focus a bit more on. Well, we've been focusing on you. I always say this, but this is the last section, the last set of questions. Who is your biggest inspiration on your journey?
Oh, my biggest inspiration. Um, I mean, I'm quite, again, a lot of people will be like, God, this dude is egotistical. I'm quite inspired by my own progress in a
That's
way.
very valid.
I'm quite inspired by my own ability to still be alive, because there were points in the past where that looked very unlikely. And I'm inspired. I think if I had to externalize that, because I will, um, I'm inspired by anyone who's brave enough and courageous enough and authentic enough to come out and not only own themselves, but be incredibly proud of it and be incredibly celebratory of that, in a healthy, positive way. Obviously,
Yeah,
like,
of course.
I've run into far too many narcissists for my liking in my life so far that I don't really want to see anymore, to be honest. I will inevitably, but in a kind of positive, healthy, balanced, and kind of well-being focused way, people just to have had pain and suffering and destruction and all other manner of things that make life so much more difficult, but to embrace all of that and then use all of it to form the most freshest, newest, authentic version of themselves, and then go on to use that for the rest of their lives. I mean, there's no greater pleasure than to see that in others. And so those people inspire me, because that's what's inspired me to try and do the same with mine. So yeah.
Great. That's great. And we talked about you going to the gym. My next question is, how do you treat yourself with regards to your well-being? Is there anything else you do that's not the gym?
I mean, yeah, there must be. Yeah, the gym is very important for me physically and mentally. I didn't even, I think I was saying earlier, mainly I go to the gym for my mental well-being. It just so happens that, funnily enough, when you
Yeah.
start training, working out a lot, you physically benefit from it, which is nice. I'll take
Yeah.
it. I'm very big on kind of, I have no issue or embarrassment or kind of almost excuse for doing things independently of other people. So I will take myself off. I love to go on walks. Like, I love to, if you put me somewhere like countryside or whatever, I'll lap it up and I'll embrace it, because for me that means peace. For me it means exploration. It means reflection. It means I can kind of, I have that control to just regulate myself in an environment that suits me. I mean, my free time, kind of, I'm very much into kind of things that a lot of people will be or won't be. I'm very much into gaming when I have the time to do so. I'll sit and watch something. Typically, if I watch stuff now, it's stuff that I'm used to. I don't really watch much that's new anymore. I think that might be a trait of familiarity, because I
Yeah.
tend to relax more now if I watch something I've already seen. I don't feel, I certainly don't feel at the moment I have a lot of mental capacity to take new stuff in. I just rely on, I'll sit here of an evening and I'll just watch stuff I've watched 100 times, because I like it. It's familiar.
Yeah.
But
That's
again,
absolutely fine.
it helps with wellness, because it relaxes me, because I know I'm safe in its company, sort of thing. Yeah, and
Yeah,
usually,
we watch the same movie a million times here at home.
yeah,
They are
yeah.
Disney movies, but
Everyone
yeah,
loves a Disney movie. Everyone loves it. Well, they don't, but the
yes,
people that do like so. Yeah, and otherwise, I'm just busy with podcasting stuff, really. But then that, as long as it doesn't become overwhelmingly stressful, that helps with my wellness, because it means something. I'm passionate about it, and it hopefully is helping other people too, which of course is wonderful. So
that all adds up together to your
yeah,
well-being. Yeah, that's
yeah.
good. And if you were a superhero or had a superpower, who or what would that be, and how would you use it to change the world?
Mm. That's really, really cool. I have not thought about that question enough. I really don't know. I think the thing of it is, when I talk about superheroes, like one of my favorite superheroes since I was teeny tiny was Superman. I love Superman, and a lot of people say to me now as an adult, they're like, "Oh, dude, could you have picked a more boring superhero?" I'm like, Superman's not boring because Superman used his, Superman turned up on a planet as an alien where everyone pretty much hated him for even turning up in the first place.
It was different.
But he didn't start killing people. He didn't start hurting people. He didn't start messing with people's lives. He came to a different planet. He was different. He wasn't accepted, but all he wanted to do was protect people, was to save people, was to make people's lives and the world they lived in a better place. And wanted to just do a good job and kind of be somebody that people could look to for hope, I guess. I mean, that is literally what the S on his chest stands for. So he's always represented hope for me, and has always represented kind of someone that people can, if they need it, they can look out for. So in that vein, maybe what I'm saying is I'm just desperate to be Superman. I don't know.
I don't find that boring at all, especially
I love
having
Superman. I love
Henry
him.
Cavill playing him in the last movies, because I love him. So no, not boring at all. And I think your logic behind it makes absolute sense. And yeah, to a certain extent, you are a bit of Superman already. So
I mean, I take the powers, but
yeah, and you're going to the gym, so you're getting muscles as well. So
I don't think there's a machine at the gym for me being able to shoot lasers out of my eyes just yet. But if there
yeah, I'm
is,
sure they will find it.
we'll get there.
We will get there. Okay, and finally, if your heart had a voice, what would it tell us?
There's a lot of people at the moment who are desperate for the world to just be kinder, just to quieten down, just to find peace, just to find space between everyone's difference. There's a lot of crying out for it, and a lot of our lives have been interfered with or kind of maneuvered around things that quite frankly don't matter, that quite frankly we shouldn't even be involved in ourselves anyway. Life's not a playground for chaos or destruction or kind of uncertainty or any other kind of thing that you can think of that doesn't serve a human being very well at all. Life's a playground for difference, for exploration, for embracing kind of everything that you love, everything that you like, everything that makes you happy, everything that fulfills you or you embrace with happiness, positivity, and not even happiness. I always say to people, don't try and be happy all the time because it's not achievable. Just find somewhere you can be content, and happiness will follow from time to time. Difference is strength. And we've said it already. I'll say it again, probably forever. Difference is strength. Difference is unique. Difference is life. I wasn't born over 30 years ago to be like the person that, was born before me or the person that was born after me. We all sat in that place being born, and we've all gone on to live different lives with different people. And that's the point. That's the point.
Yeah, and have our own purposes.
There'll be a lot of people that tell you, there'll be a lot of people that tell you now, in the past, in the future, there'll be a lot of people that tell you to fear difference, that to ignore difference, to reject difference, because difference will be a threat to the world. Difference is a threat to life. That's not true. It's not true. It's never been true. It never will be true. Like we said, as long as you're not hurting anyone, as long as you're not killing anyone, as long as you're not doing awful, terrible, unforgivable things, your life is your life. Your story is your story. You're the main character of that story until you stop being the main character. And once you're gone, your story will still live on through other people. But it's yours. And you have to be the main character in the way that your main character wants to follow through. So, that's important.
It is, and beautiful as well, and inspiring. So, yeah, Jack, thank you so much. It has been a wonderful past hour. I've completely lost track of time.
Yeah, me too. I don't know what time it is, but there we
Yeah,
go.
that's absolutely fine. Thank you so much for coming on to the Neurodiverse Voices podcast, and
Thank you so much for having
we'll
me. It's been a pleasure.
stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Thank you.